Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
Every now and then, when Buck and Jordan need to go on vacation and they can't get anybody else, you guys get me. So we're in a series, it's called Level Up, 5 ways to take your faith to the next level. Wouldn't it be cool if simply believing stuff was enough to make a difference? Think how different our lives would be. Because our problem is not generally one of a lack of information, is it? It's really a lack of practical application. Jesus talked about this all the time. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. Because you can come every week, you can highlight and circle and star and live a life then completely disconnected with all these things we believe. So, practical teaching, when discovered and applied, will make our lives better and make us better at life, and it'll make your faith grow, because God wants nothing from you. He wants so much for you in the future He has.
All right. So, big weekend.
Yes.
The Horns, Saturday.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I feel the same I always do, that they're going to win. It's almost a sure thing.
Yeah.
And they'll be national champions.
Yeah. Well, you know what I love is that every time the fall rolls around, I feel like we finally have good welcome content at church again.
That's right.
Every Sunday
That's right.
we get up and go, man, we're happy or we're sad. Welcome to church. This is a safe place.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. You can celebrate and bask in the faithfulness of the Horns, or you need some care, some aftercare.
Yep,
So
we can provide both of those
both
things,
of those things
at
are
Northpoint
great.
on a regular basis. Yeah, we always get the feedback like, oh, are we talking about the Horns again? And I think I always reply, as long as I'm involved in the programming process, we are talking about
That's
the Horns
right.
again.
That's right.
Yeah. So, you mentioned at the beginning of your message that Buck and Jordan were out of town.
Absolutely.
They were both in Florida.
Yeah.
And Jordan was sitting on a beach. I think Buck was NASCAR racing. Well, he wasn't in the car. He was watching the vehicles.
Right.
But
Practically the same.
yeah, pretty much the same thing, right? So they were out of town, but you were in town. But I know you go out of town sometimes.
Yes.
So I just wanted to more or less ask, like, favorite spot to vacay or best vacation ever.
Yeah. Well, right off the bat, it's the next one. Whatever the next place we're going on vacation is always my current favorite.
Yeah.
Because I'm, you take the personality profiles and different systems, and one of them I know you're familiar with is the Enneagram, and I'm a 7 on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So
I could have guessed that.
Enthusiastic, visionary. I've never met a trip that I didn't like to take. I mean, I'm looking forward to them. But if I had to go back and say, all right, what are like the top trips? Probably just because of the people involved and the location. I love like that Perdido Key, Florida, Alabama, Gulf Shores area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we go there at least once a year, and it's fun because we take the kids, and now their kids are a bit older, so they take friends with them, and my parents will usually go, and Jamie's dad, so we get to get down there and enjoy the beach and the sand and great restaurants and fishing, and so we have a blast down there, and it's like super familiar territory for us now because we've been going for years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how the 30A is for Ashley and I, because we honeymoon there, and then we try to go there, which is like that Destin, Seaside, Florida space.
It's all beautiful.
Yeah. Do you drive or fly?
We've done both, and every time, it seems like Jamie, my wife, about, I don't know, maybe every 5 years, she really wants to drive. And so we'll do that, and we get that out of her system, and then we fly the other time. So this year we flew, so I think I've got a few more years of that before she forgets what it was like having all the people packed in the car and with the kids and their friends. And this stage, it would be like multiple cars that we would need to get there anyway. So
or you need to borrow the Norcross bus.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Fit them all in there.
Yeah. If I do that, we may never have to drive anywhere again.
Yeah.
If I create that kind of experience. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's good. Yeah, that I-10 stretch when you're above the swamps and it's just do over and over and over again for like an hour.
And inevitably, it seems like there's a pending hurricane of doom coming or something. So you're driving through those storms and things like that. So I am a pro fly. If I can fly anywhere, I'm all about that. And Jamie usually is, like I said, every now and then I've got to get it out of her system. So we take a long road trip somewhere.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I'm a personal road trip lover, but I'm wondering once I have kids if I will still be a road trip lover.
Listen, we could use some help driving next year. I can just load up I'll let you, Jamie and I'll fly.
Yeah.
And you can haul all the kids and their friends that 12-hour trip to Perdido Key.
Hey, it sounds good.
Okay.
I'll do it.
Awesome.
But I'll also have like a 6-month-old or, 8-month-old.
That's right.
So
That's right. This will be even better. The kids can help.
Yeah.
You may want the break, actually.
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
It'll work great for everybody.
All the way around.
All right. So this past Sunday, we were in Level Up Part 3. And you shared an awesome message and talked about, Jesus' foundational teaching at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And you also shared that story at the end that I loved that just so clearly punctuated Jesus' point. I want to dive into a couple different things on this message, but as we've been going through this series about taking our faith to the next level, we've been talking to our different communicators about different aspects of their faith. And so I just wanted to start off and say, how did you end up to be a follower of Jesus?
Yeah. It's interesting. So when I was very, very little, we would go. I was what we referred to as like a holiday Baptist because we would go on Easter and Christmas.
Creasters.
Yeah, that's right. And Jamie was a holiday Catholic, so we both would go on the holidays. That's what you did. And so I was never like anti or I believed in God. I believed that Jesus was the Son of God, but I really didn't understand anything past that. It was more of I've checked the box and. I don't think I'm going to hell because I've received what Jesus did on the cross for me as forgiveness of my sins, and then I just kind of did my own thing, lived not against God or mad at God or anything, just didn't really wasn't a part of life, everyday life, and then I guess I was in my early 20s. Jamie and I were about 6 months or so from being married, and I had a friend that I was always giving tapes to, like motivational tapes, like Zig Ziglar, and tapes were these things that we used to listen to motivation on or music on. These things.
I see.
And so I was giving my buddy all these tapes, and one day he gave me a tape, and he said, "Hey, this is a really cool speaker. Is a missionary that came to our church. I think you'd really like it." I said, "Great." And so I listened to it, and I just remember thinking, after listening to it, I want to get plugged into a local church community. And it was just kind of that something in here. And so Jamie and I started looking around, going to a lot of different churches, and had a really good friend of hers that said, "Hey, we love our church over here." In fact, it's here in Austin, Shoreline. And we showed up on a Sunday, and I didn't like the music because it was way different. I was like, is this okay? Is this even allowed? Because they had a band with horns and stuff, and our exposure to the church to that point, that was not a part of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't even know if this is okay.
It was like an adjustment period.
That's right.
Yeah.
And but I loved the communicator, Pastor Rob Koch. He would come out, and he had this very, very real world, practical application of things that Jesus would teach. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I'm paying like $10 a tape for Zig Ziglar, and this stuff actually came out of the Bible. I remember just having this moment of going, wow, that's in there, and it became real to me, and it became we kept showing up every Sunday, and I began to like the music, but I loved the messages, and then one day, there was an invitation of, hey, if you want to just formally like Jesus, the Lord of your life, then we'd love to give that opportunity and to follow him. And it was very different. It wasn't just, hey, I'm going to check the box and not go to hell, but it was you want to begin following Jesus. You want to begin following him. And we've been showing you and talking about it every week, and it became a real, both Jamie and I, the same kind of moment and day. It was real special. And ever since then, we've been learning to do that. We've been trying to follow Jesus in different areas of life and growing in that together. And some 20 plus years later.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's ironic too. I mean, it was a speaker that was the moment for you, or hearing
Yeah.
that on tape, and then hearing your pastor, communicate, and now you get up on stage and you talk about those things.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. I always say it doesn't take much to connect somebody into a growing relationship with Jesus, and sometimes it's just something as simple as like my friend said, hey, here's a tape, just check it out, I think you'll enjoy it. And he didn't tell me now come to my church even. It was I enjoyed it, and I believe God, the way he moves in us, sometimes he knows exactly what we need and who to orchestrate around us to get us to take that next step of faith. And I was like, now this is really good. I want to go to church. And then we found that church because of another friend that said, hey, well, you guys should come to my church. You're looking for a church. And so I'm just, I often think back, what hangs in the balance is sometimes those little decisions that what if he would have never given me that? I'm sure God's big enough to figure out another way, but he got to participate in my faith story. Then we're still really good friends today, and we talk about it all the time. It's pretty special. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's really cool. What would have been along your faith journey? What have been some of the more catalytic growth moments for you? I mean, obviously what you just explained was one, but it's been a long time since that.
Sure.
So what have been the big growing moments for you?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's been so many. I would say I talk about this all the time when I get the opportunity, but was when we first began to trust God with our finances by saying, hey, we're going to do something we've never done before. We're going to begin to give 10% of our income first before we do anything else. And we began to write those checks. And at the time, it was Jamie and I were both working, but it wasn't a ton of money. But for us, it was a lot of money because it was like, man, but that was one of those things. Some people, I think some things are harder for others. That was one for me that I just really felt like, oh, well, this is what he's inviting us to do. And now Jamie's was a little different, and she's like, well, that's like $300 that you're about to do. I was like, yeah, I know, but really, I think God's inviting, he'll take care of us. And we truly, it was one of those, hey, I'm just going to trust you. I don't know how it's going to work out, but it was that step of faith. And since then, just seeing that over and over again in our lives, when I think he's spoken in our hearts to give over and above that 10%, when we've written some really, really big checks to things that we felt like it was God just saying, hey, lean into this, just lean into this. And the stories on the other side of that when, like we talked about Sunday, when our faith, our exercising our faith in that belief intersects with God's faithfulness on the other side, how it grows you. It gets your faith bigger. And because of my role in the financial community, I've gotten the opportunity to witness that and see that in a lot of other people's story because they tell me about it, and I get to experience it on our side. So I think that's certainly one. There's been moments where we've had some really heavy things that we've had to walk through in life, some sicknesses and illnesses that my dad actually, who's he was in the audience on Sunday, and he almost died I guess it's been about 3.5, 4 years ago. He had bacterial meningitis.
Wow.
And the
Goodness.
kind he had was just, he like woke up in the middle of the night. My mom and dad, they called me for whatever reason at like 2 a.m, which is never like hey, just checking in, right?
Yeah.
It's like something's bad. And they're just like, your dad needs you to come get him. And I'm like, call an ambulance. That's what you need to do.
Don't call me, call 911.
And the helicopter came and got him. And because it was that bad, he was, and he spent about 6 months, 3 of that in the hospital. Many times they say, hey, if you want to say something, people want to say goodbye, now's the time to do it. And it was one of those deals like where we just kept saying, hey, look, everybody dies, right? So this isn't what I'm about to say is not a, hey, you just have enough faith and everybody you love is going to live. That's not the case. Everybody dies. In fact, for what we believe, that's where actually new life begins and things actually get better. But in this context, we're going to pray to God exactly what we want. And we know, God, you raised Christ from the dead. And so that same Spirit's alive on the inside of us. And we're going to continue to pray that you can restore my dad and you can do it. And in spite of all the odds, he kept living. And just over and over again, had a code blue and all these things and kept living. And then then he said, well, he's going to get out of the hospital, probably never walk, and he'll probably never actually be able to eat without a tube. And my dad was really cool to watch too, because he said, I'm not knocking the reality of my situation, but I will push back against the finality, because I think God can, and if it's His will, He's going to. But I'm going to pray specifically, and then every day, what I'm going to do is do my little. I'm going to do what I can do. I'm going to get up a little bit, and I'm going to practice my throat exercises. And so we just kept watching, and then God's faith on the other side of that. Now my dad runs and he eats a lot. So no, I mean, it's just to watch God's faithfulness and through that, and the moments we had, and just in Him speaking. So there's been a lot of moments like that. I think that we see over and over again that God is. It's those times where He just touches, and the stories that I was telling on Sunday, where He just shows up. It's like how do you orchestrate that,
Yeah.
And so I think it's so neat to watch God just making Himself so known when you're looking for Him.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case.
Yeah, that's a cool posture to be in. I don't know where I heard it, but there was I think Mark Batterson says, don't just look for coincidences, but look for God's providences.
Yeah.
And all the coincidences you see all the time, you'll start to see God in them, and that's like really powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And I can see how for you, with your dad, with finances, with that story you shared on Sunday, how those would be kind of faith-growing moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things you talked about was this reality we all face, that we want to do things that better ourselves and better our life, and we know the things we should do, but there's this gap between actually doing them, right?
Right.
And so, and one of the things that you talked about was like, we all love better, but better doesn't necessarily mean that things are good. You talk what you just shared, with
Yeah.
your story of your dad, like, we're going to go through trouble in this world. Better potentially can mean for us that it is a heart posture. We get to experience more of God's faithfulness, His blessings in our life in those moments. But going back to the fact that we were talking about practical teaching and what do we do with what we're taught, why do you think we struggle? This is kind of a human question, so much with actually doing the things that we know we should do.
Yeah, I love that question, because in our business, and specifically in a lot of the communicating that I get to do in the financial community, it's the same thing. There's the old Samuel Johnson quote, says we need to be reminded more than we need to be instructed. And I think that's so true, because you go to a conference and you're like, oh, that was a great idea that they told me last year.
Yeah.
And I still didn't do it, right?
Yeah.
Or we're sitting in there on Sunday and it's like, oh, yeah, I do need to do that again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's for sure a couple reasons that as I observe my life and observe other people. I think one of them is fear. I think, and I don't know that we always label it that way, but we are wired, I believe, by God to make life better. I think you were created to create beauty, and we're designed to make tomorrow better than today better than yesterday. And so nobody, I think, innately does not have that in them. But as much as we want things to be better, I think also, somewhere in the subconscious, we don't want them to get worse. And sometimes, different isn't always better. We've all tried stuff and things didn't get better. In fact, they went the other direction. They got worse. And so I think, depending on what it is that we're trying, we could, whether it's in a business, let's say it's a new process or procedure or idea, or let's say giving. If I want to give, what if things don't work well?
Yeah.
What if my life actually goes backwards? And there's that old definition of insanity, though, that different isn't always better, but better's always different. You can't have better without doing something different. And the old definition of insanity, that you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And I kind of like to update it. I would say that keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect better results. Because I think sometimes you can keep doing the same thing over again and things get worse. Just because culture moves and things change, you can look at I know nobody rents a movie from Blockbuster Video, right? And they kept doing the same thing over and over again, but they didn't want to try things that would make them better for fear that, gosh, what if it gets worse? Yeah. So I think that is a big one, but I think the biggest one, and this is in my observation. In the faith community and in my personal life and just everyday practical things that I'm trying to do, I think fatigue is maybe the thing that prevents us from doing the things that we believe. We haven't done them yet, but we believe we could exercise our faith in that belief and it would make our life better, make us better at life. I think fatigue often is one of our greatest enemies. And because here's the thing is that all of us right now, you could fill up your day in your normal, okay, doing nothing new at all. You're going to run out of time before you run out of all the ideas and opportunities you could go pursue. And for the most part, if we were to like audit each other's life, follow each other around, I could figure out what your normal was. You know, how do you personally, financially, professionally, physically, and spiritually, in all the areas of life we care about, how do you go about making progress in life? And you've got some pattern, some way you think and are, and we can all have a new, which is a transformed way of like doing all those same things. And I think we talk about this all the time, even with advisors, is that your greatest opportunity to recognize your future possibilities is not about abandoning that normal necessarily. It's also not about rejecting new, but keeping a tension healthy between the two, that if there's not space for new, the normal will always consume all of your time. And it's just like you get to the end of the day and you did a lot of stuff. It's just you didn't do things that weren't a part of your muscle memory already. Yeah. And the other, new things take a different kind of energy too. It's kind of like if you've ever, you could tie your shoes and have a conversation with me right now because that's muscle memory for you. But when you were 3, it was really tough, right? I mean, you had to look at it or driving a car. You know, you can drive a car and talk on the phone and have conversations with people. But at one point in your life, like because it was so new, it required a higher amount of energy. So I think if we're not careful, if we don't create space to really make sure that we are that we're blending new into our normal. We're saying, no, this is not part of muscle memory. It's not gonna. I'm not going to drift towards it. My drift is always to the normal. Then I'm going to find myself in a position where I get to the end of the day and I've done nothing but normal. And I'm like, I knew I wanted to do that thing, but I was so busy and I just ran out of time.
Yeah. No, I wish I could go back and like take snippets of all the pieces you just said, because there was so many good like one-liners and good practical statements. You know, practical teaching statements. It made me think of, I don't know if you've ever read the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
I have.
Yeah, and that is a kind of a trippy but powerful book.
It is powerful.
And C.S. Lewis is brilliant. And for those who are listening, I'll give kind of the overview of the book, and then I'll make my point with you know what it made me think of. It's essentially kind of from the perspective. It's a set of letters to a nephew named Screwtape from his uncle. The caveat is these are demons.
Yeah.
And so it's an uncle demon writing letters to his nephew demon. And it's all about, you know, how you can play the enemy role in the life of humans, in the life of Jesus followers, and how can you get them to stumble and to not follow Jesus. And, you know, one of the things that they talk about, or the uncle says to the nephew, is, hey, just keep them busy. Just keep them busy. Keep them busy. If you can keep them busy, they're not going to think about heaven. They're not going to think about Jesus. They're just going to stay in the rut of life, and they're never going to find any improvement or find anything better, you know, for what you're saying. And there's that whole spiritual component to it of there is this like force, enemy force that's trying to keep us in this rut.
You bet.
You know, keep us from actually taking steps and getting uncomfortable and pursuing better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is so true. You know, a friend of mine, he always says it like this. He says, you know, we can easily spend so much time being what we are that we stop becoming what we would like to be.
Yeah.
And it's that becoming time that really helps shape that transformation of blending these ideas that, yeah, that's a good idea. It's not part of what I'm doing yet. It's not a part of what I'm being, but I would like to become that. I would like to exercise my faith in that belief. And I believe it would lead to a better future, a better outcome. But you got to have the time for it. You have to allocate it, and it's just a part of. It can't be, you know, conference or like a lot of times people the change is they view it as an event. Like I went to a conference, I went to church, but then you have to take that and you got to assimilate it into the rhythm of your life. And if you don't have time for that, if it's not a way of life, then it's just really easy to get a lot of good truth. And like we were talking about the old, you know, truth unapplied is like paint unapplied. It doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
And so we can build up these cans of truth that we're storing, but we just we don't have regular time to blend those into the rhythm of our life. And as a result, we'll get down the road and go, that was a good idea. I really should have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of kind of the teaching that we, you said like get in that rhythm of putting yourself in a position to hear this kind of practical teaching that does change your life, that does make you better. Because part of it is being at the event. Part of it is hearing it.
Absolutely.
How do you, because this is kind of a, I shared with you in the preparation for the message, there's kind of this film school phrase called breaking the fourth wall, when a character in a narrative film looks into the camera lens and you're like, whoa, wait, they just broke character. They're looking at me. And this message was kind of a breaking the fourth wall kind of message. It was a teaching about teaching.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But for some reason, and this is probably a whole nother topic, but for millennia now, the one person speaking on stage to a crowd of people, all the way down to the time of Jesus, has been the format in which we consume information that helps us grow in our faith.
Right.
That's significant for a number of reasons, but why, or I guess the better question is, what do you think we can do to put ourselves in those kind of events, positions intentionally on a regular basis to hear the practical teaching? And then I've got a follow-up question after that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think that we teach all the time to advisors this when they're trying to implement new ideas, but it's transferable to everywhere. There's like these 4 paradigms to helpful change, and the first of those is cultivation. So the starting point is you have to have a place where you're cultivating the ideas that you believe in, and that could be on Sunday in a Rose type environment. But it shouldn't be the only environment. It could also be a podcast that we're doing right now, right?
Sure,
that
sure.
You're going to get later in the week, and you can get those fed to you. And there's great stuff that you can get all across the podcast nation, and books that you read, and then time where you're just mulling over good ideas, or you're reading the Bible, or you're listening to another sermon series, or you're in a book, or you're in a small group. Some of my best ideas, not just traditional groups that we talk about here, but also I can't tell you, I've got a study group that I meet with, and we meet a couple times a year with other people in our industry. But it's where you're cultivating ideas. So environments, what environments, I think the best question to ask is, what environments do you have regularly, weekly, and I would say daily, that are helping you challenge your operational assumptions about life, that help you cultivate new ideas? Because cultivation's the beginning. Without that, then we're just going to kind of drift into our existing habits that we already have, never even starting to say, hey, should I question that? Should I think about doing something different here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I think that cultivation, in order to get to that place, our hearts have to be in a certain posture where we have to be willing to learn. Mentor of mine has said that the root of all sin is pride. And so sin, when you get to that place, that prideful place where you go, I don't need God, I've got a better idea. That's where we get out of a position to actually like get better and learn and grow in life.
Yeah. The belief that better is possible, right? Because if I don't start there, if I think, hey, I'm as good as it gets, or we're as far down the road as it gets, I'm not even going to put myself in environments to challenge the way I think and to develop the way I think. So, no, I totally agree. I think that going back to that being and becoming, do you have becoming time? Is there time isolated regularly? Because it's like it has a compound effect. The more frequent rhythmic time that I have on a regular ongoing basis to just, I'm looking for new, I'm looking to challenge the way I am so I can be better, I've got to become. And that becoming starts with, what are the ideas? What do I need to blend into the rhythm of my life that I think would really, really work in this particular season?
Yeah. Speaking of that being and becoming, and for those who are listening and watching, if you hear background noises, we're filming this podcast in Wombaland.
They're our fans.
And
yes. We got to keep them outside.
Yeah,
so.
We're being surrounded by some event that's going on in the Wombaland. So if you hear that in the background, that's what that is. But speaking of that being to becoming, how do you personally close that gap? I mean, because that takes a lot of intentionality to walk away from a sermon and apply it. Yeah, no.
So I think there's, if I go back to the 4 paradigms that we teach, or the 4 standards that we talk about all the time, it's helpful to me to put it into language, is you've got cultivation, you've got resolution, you've got orchestration, and then execution. Those are becoming things. Okay, so cultivation we just talked about is that how regularly am I challenging my assumptions? How regularly am I looking for new ideas that are going to help me transform to be better.
Yeah.
And so you've got that, but then you've got resolution. Resolution is simply a decision to do or not to do something. So I always say, as I'm having my kind of cultivation time, I create a parking lot of ideas, of things that I think, man, this would be next level. This would really help elevate me to a new place, it would help me become something better than what I am today. That would be super helpful, and that's in all areas of life. And so, but there's so many things. As because there are so many podcasts and there are so many great things that challenge it. I may have 100 ideas that fill up this page, and it's not practical to think I can do 100.
Yeah.
I've tried, and it doesn't work well. So it's almost like the New Year's resolution syndrome is that we look at everything we don't like about our life once a year, and we say, I'm going to change it all. And we go from being on autopilot in all areas.
This year's our year.
It's
like the Texas Longhorns.
Every year. Every year's our year.
Yeah.
Except that this year really is our year.
Yeah, of course.
But this is just saying, all right, regularly, not just once a year, but regularly looking in that parking lot and saying, all right, what am I actually going to do? What am I going to choose to do off this list of great ideas? I got these cans of paint. What am I going to put on the canvas? What am I actually going to try and blend into the rhythm of my life in light of the season that I find myself in? And really this is where I think having that time alone with God, where you're trying to listen, help me see what do you think it would make the most difference in my life right now? And really just paying attention to how can I be a faithful steward over where I find myself in this moment in light of all these ideas that I think would really move the needle. What's going to be the best one or the best two? And then you've got to orchestrate them, because once it goes from I've got these ideas, they're all in my parking lot. I've made a decision to do or not to do something, so I've made a resolution, and I'm going to do these two, and what that looks like is, and you figure out how that's going to blend in, and then you got to put it on the calendar. Again, it's so while I have regular time in my day that I'm thinking, I'm challenging my ideas. I also have regular time in my day where I'm implementing new things that are not yet a part of the normal. And that is where, again, to get something muscle memory, you got to work it. There's different things that you can do to apply whatever that idea happens to be, and you've got to have it on the calendar though regularly, because if it's not scheduled, the normal will always eclipse new. Because new. It's funny in like a business setting when I'm speaking to other advisors, I always tell them that, listen, the thing about new is it feels like you're cheating on the real work, because new's currently not adding your bottom line. It's created no value in your life so far. It's untested in your life so far, maybe tested in other people's. This is probably why it's an idea that you like. So you got to treat it, though, as important as the normal. In fact, maybe even in some of your best time needs to be allocated to new, because it weighs more, because it's new. It's not muscle memory. So scheduling it, putting it on the calendar. And then the fourth area is execution. You have to be accountable. Did I do it or did I not? And this is like a weekly check-in deal, where at the end of the week, how did I do in light of the things I had this great idea, I said I was going to do it, and then I put it on the calendar. I'm going to practice carrying this idea out each week. How did I do? And check in. And honestly, any good like counselor or performance coach or something like that, in large part, that's what they're doing. They're saying, all right, so we believe these two ideas will move the needle. And when are you going to do it? When are you actually going to apply this new paint? Yes, I know you believe the paint would look great on the wall. When are you actually going to put it on the wall? And a little bit each day will have a compound effect if you keep doing it. And then I'm going to check in with you. Did you skip or did you not do it? Because otherwise, we can have these great ideas. We can schedule them. And then if our normal causes us to push those things to the side, which often they do, then you just got to call it out. You just got to have regular time at the end of the day. And that's also where a good, being a part of a group of people that are kind of in the same season of life that you are, pushing towards the same things, can be helpful, because you can have a little bit of accountability with one another, and say, hey, listen, I just want you to ask me at the end of every week, how'd you do on what you said you were going to practice, the new thing that you were trying to blend in? How'd you do? And whatever it happens to be. But the principles are the same. It's you got to cultivate it. You got a resolution. You got orchestration. You got execution, and those things never go away, because hopefully for the rest of our lives we continue to become better, and we're looking for better out there because we've got our time for that. But then we're practicing better. It's another book I read years ago. It says, what are you becoming in the process of what you're pursuing? And so that it's that intentionality, that intentional growth. that just doesn't happen on accident. You got to have guardrails up that help keep you on track because it's so easy to drift.
Yeah. So I wrote down a couple notes as you were talking because I didn't want to forget. I wanted to come back to them. Cultivation, resolution, orchestration, execution.
Right.
Those are the 4 things, right?
Right.
So taking this to the practical example of Sunday to Sunday to Sunday to Sunday, people coming in or people listening to the podcast. So, you've got habits in life, rhythms in life that put you in a position to cultivate new things. And that's the first step, right?
Yes.
So that would be, having a rhythm of attending on Sunday. Or
yes.
When I don't attend, I'm watching online because it's a priority in my life to learn and to grow. Or it's, I guess, other way. It's listening to podcasts. It's reading books. It's all of these types of things that we can do to cultivate, right?
Yes.
And then number 2 is resolution. So, I mean, we bump into this every year. Like, we're going to have 50 sermons a year, and we're not all going to perfectly execute on all the application points of every single sermon, right? But it's all important, but we got to decide at this season of our life with what's going on, what are those, out of all those application things, what are we going to choose to really hone in on and focus on, right? So that's resolution.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to decide what it is. Orchestration. Okay, what am I going to do differently, and how am I going to do this? Because I'm going to make this change. How am I going to, function now? How am I going to put it in my calendar, like you said? And then execution, doing it, and then having the systems of accountability to hold me accountable when I don't.
Right.
Right. Did I capture?
You did. Perfect.
All right. That's good. I think that's such a cool mindset for Sunday morning and how we as Jesus followers or people even new to faith can approach Sunday morning, can approach this podcast over time to be able to really go, what's a system for me actually getting to a place of change where I'm not just hearing and believing, but I am doing the things that I'm hearing on Sunday morning?
Absolutely. It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Phoenix. His name's Whitney. Shout out Whitney. They watched on Sunday, and I was talking to him today, and it came up. He said, "Hey, the one part you got me is when you got to the place where you were teaching what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount." And when you spoke, and I've got it here, it says, when Jesus said, "Hey, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine," and I put in there, believes they're true, memorizes them, feels guilty, and comes back next week for another dose, is like a wise man who builds his house on a rock. And Whitney said, he sat there going, "Man, I can't believe Jesus said that." And he said he was really tossing my head. And then I said, "This is why you should read your Bibles," because, and he's like, then it occurred to me, oh yeah, I don't read the Bible often enough. I need to actually get in there and do that, because I would have detected that was off and wrong. But,
yeah. Well, that verse so clearly captures the cultivation side of things, which is not all bad.
Right.
But if you stop there, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And I guess an application point is from this whole piece is just whoever's listening, whoever's watching, just to create some resolution time in your life.
Yes.
Just like you said, I don't know if this is the way you said it, but parking lot, thinking, sitting in the parking lot, thinking, looking at all the different things you can engage with, and that doesn't happen accidentally. It only happens on purpose. It only happens intentionally.
That's right. That's right. And not letting, sometimes I think the volume of change, particularly when we really look at ourselves that we want to make, is so overwhelming that we don't change anything. And so I think you might have 100 things that you think, but just pick one. Just pick one, because if you do that every week, over enough time, you'll experience the compound effect. I mean, it's literally like going to the gym, right? If I go one time a year, probably you're really not going to notice. That's the other thing too. If I miss one, you won't notice that either. But if I go every day, for 5 days a week for 2 months, you experience the cumulative value that's there. And so when you have a life that's built around constantly exercising this particular muscle of becoming, you experience the compound effect that over enough time, you change one little thing, and for that, you get to the end of the year and you've changed, if it was one a week, 52 things that you built into the rhythm of your life, or even 24 things. I don't care what it is, but just allocating that time, dedicated time.
Yeah. So to wrap up, this is a message, there's a teaching about teaching. And so we can kind of look back on some of our previous messages and go, okay, in light of this, what do we do differently?
Right.
And the two that we had hit on so far were private disciplines and providential relationships, and we're going to hit on a couple more in the coming weeks as we wrap up with parts 4 and 5. But what would your just encouragement to be for people as we've kind of hit these other ways we can take our faith to the next level?
Yeah, I think it's super simple. I think you don't overcomplicate it. You continue to put yourself in great environments, right, that give you these ideas, but then always ask yourself that follow-up question: what am I going to do with what I've heard? What am I going to do with what I've heard? Because that's really what Jesus over and over again kept challenging people is, hey, you've heard a lot of stuff that I've said, and I think I'm glad you believe true things that I've said. I actually want you to exercise your faith in that belief, and I want you to follow me with it. And so how are you exercising your faith in these great ideas, in these things that you hear and believe? And so having that regular time, and again, great examples that we've already brought up, that isolated time where you're just making personal connection with Jesus in the morning and praying. I think that's a critical thing to challenging. And also taking a step further, how am I walking out this and actually putting it on the calendar? Again, the calendar is a great tool. I heard Billy Graham used to say that you really want to see a person's heart. You look at their checkbook. When people had a checkbook, I guess now you just go online and look at the savings, and you look at their calendar, and so you can see what is a priority in your life. And so look at your calendar and just say, do I have enough becoming time? And then schedule that in whatever it is that you're trying to take from new to normal to blend into the orchestrate in the regular rhythm of your life.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, Wes, thank you so much for
pleasure
talking on the podcast. This was so much fun. I learned a ton, so I appreciate it, man.
I love it.
And to all of our listeners and viewers, we're going to be jumping into part 4 of Level Up this week, and we're going to be hearing from Jordan Geis. I'm really, really excited for you guys to hear it. A little bit of a personal and special part of his message that is going to be really powerful. So make sure you are there or you're watching online. We'll see you then.
Awesome.